Hey everybody, BTO Pro here. So I'm about to build a web component and I think I'm getting a grasp on this. So instead of just rambling about it on Twitter as like, hey, this is a thing and you should care about it, and then going and doing it, I kind of wanted to document my process in some way. So this will sort of just start out as a, train of thought, ramble, blog post slash building something. But if you're not familiar with what I've been rambling about, so I said, all right. So I'm quickly becoming addicted to this project called Polymer. So you can learn more about it. It's polymerproject.org. But basically, using what's built into browsers and will be a core part of all browser specs very soon. It's fully supported in Chrome, and there's polyfills that help fill in the gaps in Firefox, Safari, and Edge, and IE11, I believe. Is that you can build this really awesome stuff, which they then have a hosting platform for, showcase platform, on webcomponents.org. So what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about our initiative with these in the Elms project. So instead of constantly doing element design work in Elms Learning Network and that being a one-off, I thought, well, what if we abstracted this out into a web component and then we namespace them in a way that they could be generalizable and reusable by anybody in any project. And so what we came up with was LRN. And so we wanted to make tags and a tag structure that's super readable. The whole idea with web components is basically you can define your own HTML elements. And so members of the core Elms team and starting to collaborate with other groups that we've never collaborated with before. It's awesome. We're starting to build basically our own HTML spec. So we've got 9 elements now that all do different things. And so this is a little bit of overview of, hey, this is kind of where we are with this and what our thinking is in general. To get a picture of where we're trying to go with these, you can look at the ontology. We've got it broken out into kind of some guiding principles, what we're trying to do here, who these are for, some goals of it. But the idea is that if an instructor or instructional designer wants to express a concept of a lesson, that right now they go and write a whole ton of HTML, and that's not sustainable. Maybe they're not web experts, maybe they're not accessibility experts, but they are instructional experts and they are education and teaching experts. And so if we can make the web conform more to that world instead of making them conform to the world of the web, we can provide better experiences because there's less friction between the platform itself and their knowledge set. So you can see as an example, we would have like an LRN-lesson, and this would be an actual legitimate HTML tag that your browser is able to interpret. And so in this case, this might be like lesson 1. Label would be introduction to Polymer, and icon would be my icon. So one of the goals of LRN is that it's super readable, very clean if you were to look at this in a body field or a text area, but be able to unpack itself into something significant. So let's take a basic example. This is an icon demo, and so one of the first types I made was called LRN-icon as a root element, and then icons, which kind of expresses all the different icons we have. And so what we had been doing previously is lots of class manipulation, SVG implementation, switching between whether or not we wanted to use a font or we wanted to use those previous 2 methods I mentioned. And these are arguments that are silly. Plus, we would be switching out what our design framework was all the time. If you've seen Elms, and it's kind of, this is a beta thread, but it's moved towards materialized CSS. But before that, it was in Zurb Foundation, and so we've been shifting around to these different design frameworks, and finally, I kind of said, no, I'm not doing this anymore. So what Web Components affords us is the ability to basically make our own standard, and then that abstraction will let us kind of do it whatever the way we want to, but the tag structure doesn't change above the hood. So as a simple example, all right, this is a vocab term. Okay, cool. We've done these for a couple months now. You see hey, I click and it shows me the term. The issue 1, this example here is not accessible. Issue 2, if I go and I hit edit on this, you'll see it's a card, a whole ton of div gobbledygook, and then my body tags. But here's where we want to get with it. Instead, you notice I have an LRN icon tag down here. And see how much cleaner that is, right? To have an icon expressed versus the icon on this card is even this, right? So that is the icon for the close X at the moment. So one thing you do is, well, hey, we made a comment. Cool. So I want to add a comment icon to this page that I could copy it. And let's delete that for now. And actually, we're going to save that because we're going to change that card into something cool later. So let's paste in that LRN icon comment. And you see I ticked off the structure quite significantly here. Let me see what I did there. Source, LRN comment. Let's make sure that's in like a P tag or something. Okay, simplify the output. There we go. I must have had some other garbage in there. But cool, so we get our little comment. Another neat thing, since it is part of the native web then, I can go in, I can inspect, and you'll see, hey, it says LRN icon, and it says comment, and I'm pretty sure this part still works. I may have changed the scoping, but now, if I know the names of other icons, I can switch between them. Now, this is only in the local, instance here, but that's really helpful for developers for testing purposes. Like if I wanted to see, what is this like with the studio icon, right? I could throw in studio. Because we can define our own properties, we could actually extend LRN icon to start to have, maybe there's, instead of icon, there's also background color as a property, and then it sets it, as opposed to getting into all this, class gobbledygook where people are writing blue, light, or 2, or whatever it is, right? In order to achieve that they could say background equals blue, and then color equals red, instead of needing to know that actually it's text hyphen red, I believe. Nope. See, exactly. I didn't even know what it was. And this is red hyphen text, I bet. There we go. Hideous, too. So, if we ratchet it through a property, we could also start to break down the conventions in a structured way. So maybe we could do a detection to say, if you choose red as the icon, you can only choose these certain backgrounds. Now we're getting into accessibility land. To pop open one of these little items to see what they look like, let's go and let's actually look at, block quote, because I did that the other day. That's a pretty decent one. So I wanted to make a block quote. We have a request to, make quotes in a consistent way, but I wanted to do things beyond just a block quote tag that is native to the browser. So what we did is we generated a LRN design block quote. And so the first thing you need to get with web components is the component comes as a single HTML file, which is stinking awesome. So it makes it very readable. Any implementation of this in the page is also scoped to exactly what you see here. So this will be presented the same way everywhere. I'm not going to get into shadow DOM versus light DOM and all that type of front-end developer garbage, but just know that this is telling modern browsers, hey, if you see LRN-block quote, I need you to inject all of this instead. So it's kind of like a by reference, if you will. So you can see that then I've got my style, so that's all my CSS. I can collapse that. Then I've got an actual normal HTML tag, right? Everything boils back to something more normal looking. Although you can import and use other tags in here. They start to become valid tags within themselves. You can nest them. You could start to kind of get a sense of the fact that you can build a whole interface or a whole system this way. So for this simple example, I have a block quote, and then we start to get a little bit into like, variable land. But basically this $equals means whatever the output of this is, throw it in this field, right? And so I run a function called generate class. The other cool thing about this is I have my CSS, my HTML template, and then I can also include JavaScript. So what Polymer provides beyond just the stock implementation of what a web component is kind of support for this abstraction, right? So you can keep all this stuff nicely knit together. It has some nice helper functions and things too.
But so what I did is I made a generate class object, or sorry, function. And generate class takes into account decorate, outset, and background. And so then what I do is, if you see outset, decorate, or background as a property on this element, then it gets passed in here and it generates an associated class for it. So if you put decorate, then it's going to add the decorate class, which then I can go into the CSS and see that the decorate class is going to do something fancy. So let's look at that tag. I've uploaded, or I've made webcomponents.org aware of these tags, which is another cool feature of it. So I've named it LRN design block quote. Another awesome feature of Polymer is you can have it auto-generate these little documentation demo sites pretty easily. It's pretty much a command. And so you can see these are the properties that people could use, the types for them, default values. You'll see that decorate and outset both have a default value of false. That's because they're set that way in that file, and that there's a generate class method. So then what I can do is go to the demo and we can see these. And so we can see that my little LRN design block quote looks like a nicely formatted quote, but the awesome thing is, copy this so you can see it in a text editor here, is what it's doing is we've got LRN design block quote, a decorate, which then runs through a function and puts that decorate class on, quote, which is the property for what quote to render, which, there it is, right? Disrupt, innovate yourself out of a job. Citation, which it then takes whatever's in the citation field, throws it there, formats it a certain way. And then you can see we could present a demo site that has all the different flavors of this tag so that someone could copy and paste them. So, you know, I can scroll down and see, well, if you don't have those options on, you get this. We actually have outset as well. And then I also do this other demo space where you can see it in the context of other material potentially, right? So that first one is going to flow within, but an outset actually explodes outside the boundaries of the container it's in for a simple typographic effect. So I think you can see why this might be a super powerful concept. Well, I mentioned a minute ago, another thing about this that I've fallen in love with is you can have components in components. So we're going to take this block quote and we're going to fork a component I already made, which is LRN assignment. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to turn it into an LRN vocab tag. And an LRN vocab tag, if we go to our definition that we've set in motion here, we go to LRN ontology, and we can see there's LRN vocab. And the idea with this one is it is a vocab term, so it should have a term field, a definition, and we're not going to implement the knowledge source aspect right now. That needs more planning. But so what I did is I copied that LRN hyphen assignment folder, and now we're just going to start renaming stuff, basically. So I started doing a little bit of that to speed up the process. But what you get in your LRN hyphen vocab file here is at the top you do these imports, and this is how the browser is aware of the definition of these web components. So what I'm able to do then is I'm able to repurpose things that I've already made. So I already made that block quote, so then I can import the block quote definition into the vocab definition. So then when vocab is seen on the page, it's able to utilize my block quote that I made. And so now what I can do is I can make, you know, in the LRN spec, we've abstracted instructional significance and purpose from design elements. So we've got instructional and we've got design elements, kind of this fun play on words. And so what I can do is with my LRN element, I can utilize an LRN design element, keep design separated, fix accessibility issues or whatever pops up, you know, new design flexibility in just block quote, and have it automatically propagate into all of my LRN things. So anything that I want to represent as a block quote, I'll be able to do, whether that's a vocabulary term or an assignment or a lecture or a quote from an author or whatever that thing is. So let's look at, you know, kind of break down this tag a bit that I've been working on. So what I could do is, and this is a Polymer convention, it's like their stamper, if you will, but they have very simple, hey, if this case is met, then you're going to do whatever I say here. So
I don't think I want to use paper card, but am I importing it? Yeah, fine, we could do that, it's fine. So you can see in paper card has support for a heading, an image, this is from stuff that we copied before. Well, we don't have an image in this item we're making. If we scroll down to where the JavaScript aspect of this is, you can see I haven't converted all this yet. So what we do is I'd say vocab, and then if we go and look at our ontology, we said, hey, term and definition. Although I already started on the little demo site for this, laying these out. So you can see I have term and definition, and then I'm source and display. Now, what we're going to do for source, I'm going to copy that. And we need what? We need term. So I'm going to say term and definition and source. And then we're going to get rid of these ones. And we're not going to put in that last one there. So I can explain what that is. But there's display, you notice. So I'm not going to put in display, and that'll bring up another concept in not just LRN, but Polymer. But let's give some defaults here. So value, and I don't want a value necessarily for term and definition, although you could provide them if it makes sense for like a demo site, or if there was a base state, and then if those properties are defined, then they show up here. So I've got my vocab. This LRN assignment thing, or assignments, is not needed because we don't have a concept currently of multiple vocabulary terms together. And let's search for the word assignment. So the first place we're going to see assignment is in if it's a drawer. And now what I can do is I can go, okay, well, what is a drawer in our setup? So I can go back to the webcomponents.org site and search for LRN design. I can see drawer is there. Let's fire up drawer, fire up the demo site. There are other ways to do this, but just to give you an idea. So drawer, and this hasn't been finished yet, but drawer is takes into account an icon and some text inside of it, and then it creates a flyout. So if there's no property, it's a flyout from the left. If there is a property of a line right, then it flies out from the right with that same text. So let's implement that in here, and we kind of wire this stuff up. So I have my LRN design -drawer, and then I'm going to pick an icon. Well, where do I get my icons from? So I can go, and I can kind of cheat here because I know the path, but I can go to LRN icons, so I knew it was in my history, and hit the demo for that. And you can start to see how these concepts stack together so nicely, right? So I don't have a question of, oh, what icons do we have? I just go and look at the thing. So I don't think it'll make a ton of sense, any of these icons just yet. But let's just do dot grid, or there was a letter. There, A, fine. We'll do about. That's, just for the purposes of this. So we're going to go back to code. We're going to say LRN icons about align right. And then we got to look at these properties, right? So we don't have that. So we don't have a title. The double, mustache brace or curly brace, whatever you want to call it, basically has Polymer tell the component, hey, whenever you render, take whatever value equals this property and inject it here, is kind of the simple part. So I can say definition goes there, and now what this will say is, okay, if they said render it as a drawer, then print out this stuff, okay? And the stuff we're printing out is LRN design drawer, icon, show and about icon, fly it out from the right side, and then we have a term and a definition, which term and definition are driven by these properties in the tag. Source is also what I have, right? So let's put source in there too while we're at it, and we'll do that under site because a site tag is a legit HTML element. Whoops. And we'll do our double braces for source. Cool. So now what we would output would have that. Let's take a pause on that, and let's turn this into a little demo site, because I mentioned that before. So one of the other really powerful aspects of Polymer is it has a CLI. So I can go to LRN-vocab here, and we can see, there's my repo. I've already gotten some Bower components ahead of time, so I'm not going to cover that part right now. But what I can do then, if I want to test this item out, I can do Polymer serve -open, and that will force my browser to open, and we'll see no documentation found at the moment, which probably means there's an error. So this is another nice way you can do some debugging before you ever push this up anywhere. I can look in the console, and we can see there's a reference to LRN-vocab-LRN assignment. So I have a reference still to assignment somewhere that it shouldn't be, and I'm pretty sure, yep, if I look in the index, it's probably going to be there. So this is only because I'm converting it from an existing design pattern I used. But we're going to save that, and then refresh this page, and we'll see that we had an error parsing our script because of a syntax error in LRN-vocab itself on line 73. And so we can kind of go back and forth in debugging these. Oh, and you see, hey, need a comma there. Cool, refresh, woohoo! All right, so it was able to generate this little API site off of that reference automatically. Then I can hit demo, and we can see I haven't wired that one up just yet, but this is the one that I was working on, right? So we can see that we have our LRN vocab, and I wrote the word demo with default, and that's not what it is clearly. We can look through that and see those properties are there. And I told it, hey, display drawer. And because I said display drawer, that meets the case statement. And now we've got our definition of pedagogy with a title directions and this citation tag. And see, I've got all the inherited behaviors of the way that a drawer works. I have not done anything special with drawer to do that. This is why this concept is so mind-blowing if you've done any web development for, I don't know, the last 20 years. So let's look at our examples here, right? So that was for vocab, and that was for a drawer, and so we're going to say, let's make this LRN vocab drawer display. And I mentioned before briefly, but we didn't go into it. There's display as an attribute, right? So you saw it in this, right? It says, hey, displays drawer. So then you're probably thinking, well, how the heck did that happen? Because there's no property that says display. Well, this is where the magic of behaviors comes in. And in Polymer 1, it is a little bit magic. In Polymer 2, you can do like actual class inheritance of objects, and so it's less magic. That's actually one of the taglines in Polymer 2 is that there's less magic and it's more of just use the platform. So let's look at how that got in there. We're going to go to, I have an LRN-sys-behaviors tag. And to see how I pulled that in, again, same import method, LRN-sys-behaviors. And so I'm going to open that. And all LRN-sys-behaviors is kind of, if you're familiar with CMS systems or JavaScript libraries in general, you kind of have this global context, if you will, of where you can throw functionality. And so in Polymer land, we go with window, which is just a native part of the browser. And so I say, hey, do LRN behaviors, attach it to the window, then create a behavior within there called display behaviors. And so I'm kind of inheriting those pieces of functionality up here, and that's where it says behaviors. And so it's basically kind of like object inheritance where, it's like a subclass of something. It's going to take into account whatever's defined in here and then layer on top of it these additional items. And so if we look in there, I have a function called getDisplay, I have a function called matchDisplay, and I have a property called display with a default value of card. And all this little behavior is in charge of is making sure that end users don't have to do this. So I could force people to go in and they would have to say display equals LRN design drawer. And that is valid. If I put it in, cool, it matches the same, even though I now wrote LRN design -drawer instead of just drawer. And it's not a huge deal, but you shouldn't have to know that. right? And so if we take that, lob that off, we can have a shorthand. And then if you notice in the tracing back, we go into the vocab. We can see there's match display, which is actually using the function from LRN sysbehaviors. If we read match display, it's doing a test case and another test case, right? So it's saying, are these two things equal? And then if we look at what the two things are, it's, hey, the case is drawer, and then the display is whatever the display property is. And so even if that's, as it was before, LRN design hyphen, or it's just drawer, our little get display translation function will ensure that whatever comes out is translated. You know, if there's no hyphen, it's going to make sure that it's LRN design card instead of just card equals LRN design hyphen card, or even if it's just card. What this also lets you do is have use cases like in vocab here for paper card. And because there's a hyphen, now it will have to match paper card specifically. And so let's wire up paper card, because if you notice in the demo, paper card has an image and other stuff, and we don't have those things, right? Paper card is also a special element that's been seeing a lot of work in something called hacks, and we're not gonna talk about that at the moment. Sorry, LRN design card is rather. But so let's take this paper card, right, and how do we wire it up? We go, okay, there's a term. Well, that should be heading. There's content of the card, and content, we probably want to put our definition and our source in. So let's throw those in that content tag. Whoop. And then let's look at other stuff, card content. We don't have card actions associated with this necessarily. Like, we don't have support for a URL yet, but that might be a good place to put like a URL button. But let's take that out of there for now. Okay, we're gonna hit save. And now if I implement paper card, you know, let's do both at the same time here. So with LRN design card, which is an abstraction of paper card, let's do term. Let's make sure there's no image in there, because that won't make sense. And then again, we'll overwrite details with this definition and source part. Okay, so now these three should be wired up. Now if we go back into our little demo, let's make sure we're implementing these correctly. All right, so we have a card. Let's make that card, and card is default for LRN design card. So let's just do LRN hyphen vocab as card, and then we'll put default there, and then we'll do as drawer, and then, because the word basic is a bit redundant there, we'll do this as, this one would be paper card, we'll do. Okay, and then actually kind of tip my hand on that a little bit as to what I was adding support for from before, but instead of block quote, let's do paper hyphen card for that one. And this isn't default, and this one's not default, and that one won't be paper card. It will be block quote, which is coming back to what we talked about originally as our little design element. So now I've got my demo in place. Let's go and go to the browser. We're going to refresh this. Demo. Okay, so now this is as card, which is our LRN design card. You can see that the LRN design card clearly is implementing some kind of default here. So we're going to need to come up with, you know, this is where we work with that element to say, okay, well, we don't want these defaults. Like, how do we want this presented? We can see our drawer is here from before, right? Drawer's fine. And then, right, here's paper card, right? So paper card, which doesn't have the connotations of an LRN design card, paper card looks fine, right? There's a pedagogy, and then this is the assignment directions, which is what that text is, right? Definition, this is the assignment directions. And then our actual definition in this case, sorry, not definition, citation. Then, and we'll go to this last one here. So we've got LRN hyphen vocab as block quote. And you see there's nothing because we don't have a case for it. So the way we're going to account for that is we go into our vocab here. You see we have drawer. I'm going to copy this little guy. Okay, paste it down there. And the case we want to match now is block quote. And then if we go into our block quote from earlier, where did I put block quote? Okay, there we
go. Our block quote, right, has support for quote, citation, decorate, outset, and background. And so quote and citation probably make the most sense here. And so what we're going to do is go into our vocab here. Nope, cancel. We want to save that. We'll go into our vocab for block quote. We're going to change this to LRN design block quote. And we're going to have a quote and a citation. And so we want quote and citation. And then our quote, we're going to make the definition. I'm going to see if I can do and the term. To be perfectly honest, I haven't done that yet, so I don't know that it'll map both of those super happy. This could be a case where you actually have to do this, which means it's like a composite, like it figures out what they should be. It's useful with classes. And then citation is going to be our source, so that we're not writing a cite tag. And so we'll put that there. Now we're going to delete the guts of this. Save, and let's see what happens. So back over to that. All right, go to the bottom. And it didn't seem to like that addition. So let's do quote equals both. I don't know that that will work, to be perfectly honest, but let's try it first. Okay, demo. Nope, not there. So then let's just do definition instead of quote. Okay, demo. Nothing. All right, can do inspect. And we can see in the console, we got a 404 not found on LRN design block quote. Now, that's because it doesn't exist. So, I mentioned we weren't really going to cover Bower in this, but we can briefly here. So let's X out of this, if I can hit the right button. So I don't have that dependency, so what I could do is I do Bower install save, which will write it back to my bower.json, so it's a dependency for later. And then it's LRNWebComponents / LRN design - block quote. And do that, and you're going to see a whole bunch of fun stuff from Bower race by. And now that dependency is saved there. What that does, if you're not familiar with Bower, is the -s save writes it into this file as a dependency. Sorry, that was the block quote one. What I wanted was the vocab. There we go. Vocabs, bower.json. If we look at that one instead, you'll see there it is. So that wrote that line there and said, hey, you need at least version 0.0.1. Okay. Now, what it also did is it went into Bower Components and then it added a directory in here called LRN design block quote. And then you'll see our block quote, and it also then spiders these, so then it has its dependencies and so on and so forth. So now that we have the actual element there, refresh the page. Whoops, killed my mini site. So what I have to do is serve it again. Polymer serve open. Now we've got our mini site back up. Do demo, scroll all the way to the bottom, and now we'll see this is the assignment directions. Yay! In our block quote. What we could also do, now that we have that down there, is let's look at block quote. Well, block quote has support for decorate. Now, with a vocab term, decorate doesn't make a lot of sense. But background might, right? Maybe we want to offset in some way, and yes, I'm still playing with those styles. But so we go back to our LRN-vocab. We have background there. I'm actually going to add back in that term from before, since I misidentified why that was failing. And then the $sign to compute. Let's see if it likes that. I haven't tried that. So, oh, there we go. It did it. So then we got pedagogy. This is the assignment directions. What I could also do in this case, because I'm kind of mashing these two together, is I could put a colon, right? And it's just a text field at that point. So it's a text field, but it's concatenating. And so now we get pedagogy, colon. This is the assignment directions. I'm not 100% positive that this part will work, but it should. So let's inspect this, and we're going to look at LRN design block quote, right? We've got that there on the page. Awesome. But let's go up to vocab, right? And you see it's the same thing. It's basically the browser said, hey, vocab told me that I should inject block quote. And then it goes, well, block quote told me that I should inject a block quote tag. And so you can kind of see the guts of how it did that. But I should be able to change this and have it reflected in real time because I did the double curly brace, which implies two-way data binding. So instead of pedagogy, I could say education. And now that part of my tag automatically updates. I could take the definition, and I believe I actually copied the definition of pedagogy from before. Going through a list, there we go. So there's the real definition of pedagogy instead of that goofy thing. Now we've got the real definition of pedagogy. Hey, that doesn't make sense. Pedagogy, right? So now we have pedagogy, and pedagogy is just blah, blah, blah. Got that quote in there. Maybe the quote's a little bit too long, right? I don't need Wikipedia contributors. I don't necessarily need pedagogy, obviously, right? MLA style for the win. Let's just do that instead. Okay, so this is kind of the way that you're able to stack these things all together. I could also, I believe, jump in down at the LRN design block quote, and I think I can take away background. Yeah. Yeah, see, so now I've been able to take away the background. So I'm starting to be able to influence the design aspect. So I could say, let's see what that looks like with background on it. Or I could say, well, background is nice. What was that other tag? Offset, I believe. Was it offset? But then I can, I have this well-documented design spec basically is what you're building out as you do this. So there isn't a question of what is available. You can kind of go back through and say, well, hey, it's outset, and I think I wrote offset. So if I do outset, now it'll explode out of its boundaries. If I do decorate, now I've got that little tag on it. Now I can also look at this and go, okay, well, clearly those two design, or those two aspects of design conflict. Let's take away background, that's stupid, and let's take away outset. Right, and so now I'm starting to have a conversation about design options with very little effort involved, right? These are the types of things where normally you get into arguments over several emails, over a lot of time about the position of XYZ or the color of this. And so instead of arguing about these things and instead of it being unsustainable right now, where, forever we've had nested divs and nested divs and nested divs and nested divs and CSS files that are all over the place, and who knows where that stuff is coming from. We can start to compartmentalize and componentize, web-componentize, all of these things so that it becomes way more sustainable, way more shareable, remixable. So for example, another one of these elements, just kind of ending on a, wow, you can do some cool stuff with this. Some people, you can make AJAX calls with these. So like there's an iron AJAX element that literally just streamlines making web requests. Well, then you combine that with the two-way data binding, and you wrap an element above it, and now you're able to mix things in dynamically to get data to show up, from an end source. So I could also go into LRN design and let's do more elements. That'll show all of them. There's a really stinking cool one here. There it is. Content sequencer. This is a fork of an element I found called Google Code Lab. I don't actually believe it's on Web Components, but let's see. No, Google Code Lab is not actually on here, but it's used by Google to educate people about Polymer. Well, we forked it and renamespaced it. It still says that its license is Google Code Labs because that's what it came from. But then we took out some parts that didn't make as much sense. And what you can do with this component, right? So I have LRN design content sequencer. And the content sequencer is a thing that then can contain content sequencer steps. And so we can define multiple steps, put them in there. And you can see there's also the definition for step, which is another cool aspect of web components. I have two elements defined in the same file. I haven't really had a preference either way, but in this case it makes sense because these two are they make up the same thing. They don't work. One doesn't work without the other very well. So let's hit the demo for what this does, and those tags build this site. So this is basically building this whole application off of those simple tags. If I do view frame source, we take a look at this. You can see most of it is honestly just my Ipsum text. So it's generating that whole GUI off the fact that I said title equals Elm's Learning Network Concepts. That's why you see that there. The time remaining is another awesome aspect of this. It's actually adding up. Each step has a duration defined. And then, so that one says 25, that one says 5, that one says 25. And so it adds those up so that as you go through them, you notice the time ticks down. It's also very keyboard navigable because they have elements, of course, that say like keyboard, A11Y keys type of an element. And so you don't actually have to figure that stuff out. I could also do, and this is left to right arrows now because you can't see that as easily, left to right arrows and trigger the same type of an interaction pattern. We could also make it so that once we get to the end, you notice the last page, it has this, hey, check mark, you did a great job. Well, and this is part of where the fork comes in. We added support for a done link, and then the done link can point wherever you want. So then when someone finishes the interaction, that they get taken to some website that makes more sense. That was going to try to frame Elm's Learning Network in there, which is why I didn't do anything since it's in an iframe. But that's kind of the idea why I've been so excited about web components technology in general. If you want to learn more, I would highly recommend you go to Polymer Project or webcomponents.org. We've got an organization related to Elm's Learning Network specifically for our learning web components, and we've prefixed them as LRN. We have, I believe, 9 or 10 up at the time of this writing. Got a lot of planning work invested in this. Really interested in trying to create kind of a design community within the edtech space, or even not, right? I mean, you could just, if you like the way that we communicate our icons, or you like, the way we've done our behaviors. These are things you can fork and kind of pull apart, make your own, enhance your own systems as a result. So if you're interested in learning more, I'd highly recommend checking out the ontology, check out some of our, construction material as far as the way we're kind of envisioning this. We always need more contributors to these things. What we're thinking as far as design elements, ontology, hacks, which we didn't really cover, but hacks is something that was in this assignment element, and this is very prototype phase still, but the idea behind hacks is that we could place a smart element into what's normally called a dumb element, right? So this is a dumb element. It just is here. It's for pure design aesthetic purposes. It's not talking to stuff, passing data around necessarily, but we could put hacks element into this, and you see the hacks element when I hover over. It creates this bar. So that is hacks. It's actually a tag that lives inside other tags. You'll see some errors on there. So there we go. So there it is, hacks edit bar. That defines kind of the things that it's able to modify. I'm not going to go into detail with that. It's still heavily in flux. But the idea would be that if you're building the web, why not just reach out and edit the web? Stop using all these, mediary sources. Stop using WYSIWYG editors and all this stuff. The native web is able to do these things now very well. It's just no one has built a workflow that isn't closed source to do it. And so we can start to build a completely open website tonight platform into our elements. Our elements become self-aware of what's modifiable, and now I can change this attribute. And now it's taking into account the two-way data binding that was leveraged before when you saw me clicking and editing things, but it's doing it on the front end. So imagine someone had, a content author has the ability to edit this, that we deliver it with a tag that obviously is validated in some way, but that they're then able to edit this because it's been put into the editable mode or whatever. And so that then when I click the pencil, it knows I don't need this to be cafe forever. It's a picture of a forest, right? And that if we start to wire this up to all of these, right, that you're actually modifying all these properties, and what it's doing under the hood is very transparent. It's just, if it's changed this attribute, well, it used to be assignment title. So instead of me going into the tag and doing it that way and then it not being saved, what if we put it into an editable state? We make the changes to the underlying things, right? Maybe we have support for modifying the actions. Maybe we have support for modifying this by doing a drag and drop uploader for that, right? that then when I hit save, that it would kick off an event that could be captured by a CMS or a more traditional back-end system, bubble that event up and say, hey, a person with the correct permissions edited this aspect of this page. I need you to save it to be this now. And so we start to have HAX is short for headless authoring user experience. And so in that, we want to make what you see is literally what you are getting. No more WYSIWYG editor or interpreted garbage. That you are able to reach out and just manipulate the web. Much more website tonight type of stuff. So that's kind of part of the roadmap where we're going with these things. If you again, I encourage you to check out LRNWebComponents on GitHub. We have some of these items built out. Some of them in the planning phase, some of them in the, hey, this is a neat, like in this case, paper avatar. Hey, we need avatars, so let's reach out, let's check out what they're doing with it, right? So this might be an element that wraps paper avatar into it so that we can kind of ratchet down some of the options. These are all out there. There's so many web components already out there. There's ones that do like credit cards. There's ones that do like Photoshop in the browser editing types of things, just ridiculous stuff. Hey, you want to accept credit cards and not have to deal with P2 risk? Yeah, there's a tag for that. It's pretty awesome. So if you have any questions, I am at BTO Pro on Twitter, or there is the project itself of elmsln, right? You can find out more about the project, why we are building this LRN thing, how it integrates, and all that good stuff. So thank you for stopping by.